India made one of the most painful economic concessions in recent memory. It agreed to stop buying cheap Russian oil that was saving Indian consumers and Indian industry billions of dollars every year. It promised to buy $500 billion worth of American products. It offered to cut its own tariffs to zero. And in return? The United States Supreme Court struck down Trump's entire tariff system as illegal. The deal India agreed to is now worth less than the paper it was announced on. And a new American investigation, targeting India specifically, could hit harder than anything that came before. So the question every Indian needs to be asking right now is, did Modi just get played? Welcome to BharatLens. This is the story no one is telling you straight. The India-US trade deal was announced with fanfare in February. Modi called it a landmark moment. Trump called Modi one of his greatest friends. The tariff on Indian goods was supposed to drop from 50% to 18%. India was going to become America's preferred manufacturing partner. The decoupling from Russia was sold to the Indian public as the price of a bigger prize. 3 months later, the deal is unsigned. The legal framework it was built on has been destroyed by America's own Supreme Court. And the US has launched a brand new investigation into Indian industries that could result in tariffs even higher than what India originally faced. This is the full picture. And it is not a comfortable one. To understand what has gone wrong, you need to understand what India agreed to, and why. Through most of 2025, India was paying some of the highest tariff rates in the world on its exports to America. First came a 25% reciprocal tariff as part of Trump's sweeping Liberation Day announcement in April 2025. Then, when India refused to stop buying Russian oil, Trump added another 25% on top, a punitive surcharge specifically targeted at New Delhi. By August 2025, India was facing a 50% tariff on its goods entering the American market. To put that in context, that is higher than what China was initially facing, and China is a country America is explicitly trying to economically contain. India's exports to the US, pharmaceuticals, textiles, gems, engineering goods, software services, started to feel the pressure. American companies looking at India as a manufacturing alternative to China began to hesitate. The cost advantage that India had spent years building started to erode. New Delhi had to move. And so India moved. By the end of 2025, India's state-owned refiners had quietly begun signing contracts for American liquefied petroleum gas. Indian private refiners started reducing their Russian oil intake. The political groundwork for a deal was being laid. Then in February 2026, the phone call happened. Trump announced on social media that the two countries had reached a trade agreement. The tariff on India would drop to 18%. India would reduce its own barriers to zero. And India would commit to buying $500 billion of American energy, technology, agriculture, and coal over the next 5 years. Modi celebrated. He posted on social media calling Trump's leadership vital for global peace. The framing was of a historic reset, two great democracies, two great leaders, getting things done. Then the floor fell out. On February 20, 2026, just 2 weeks after the trade deal announcement, the United States Supreme Court issued a ruling that changed everything. It struck down the entire legal basis of Trump's tariff regime as unconstitutional. The court found that Trump had misused emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs, and that these tariffs had no valid legal foundation. Every reciprocal tariff, including the ones on India, was ruled illegal. Within hours, the Trump administration scrambled. It imposed a flat 10% tariff on all countries under a different legal provision. A 150-day clock started ticking. After that window closes in July, the legal authority for even that flat tariff expires. Now here is the problem this created for India specifically. India had negotiated an 18% rate under the old tariff framework. Every other country in the world was now paying just 10%, the flat rate. If India had finalized and signed the deal it agreed to in February, it would have been locked into paying 18% while its competitors paid 10%. India would have negotiated itself into a worse position than doing nothing. New Delhi immediately said it was not in a hurry to sign. A Commerce Ministry source told reporters, and this quote deserves to be read carefully, "We are not in a hurry to sign any deal." The new investigation is a pressure tactic. It is a spanner in the works. That is a senior Indian government official describing America's trade strategy as a pressure tactic and a spanner. That is not the language of partners. That is the language of adversaries at a negotiating table. But it gets worse. In March 2026, the Trump administration launched a new round of trade investigations under Section 301 of the Trade Act. 16 economies were targeted, including India, China, the European Union, South Korea, and Vietnam. The investigation covers sectors like steel, solar modules, petrochemicals, textiles, semiconductors, and automotive products. What is Section 301? It is a law that allows the United States to investigate trade practices it considers unfair or harmful to American industry. If those investigations conclude that a country is engaging in harmful practices, the US can impose targeted punitive tariffs, and unlike the blanket reciprocal tariffs that the Supreme Court struck down, Section 301 tariffs have a stronger legal foundation. They are harder to challenge. They are more targeted. And they can be sector-specific, meaning they can be designed to hit the exact industries where India is most competitive. The hearings for these investigations were held in early May, this week. The conclusions are expected by June or July. If the US finds against India, it can impose a new round of tariffs that could be higher than anything India has faced before, and this time, they would be legally bulletproof. India has pushed back formally. The Indian government submitted a response to the American Trade Authority rejecting all the allegations. It said the investigation provided no real evidence of structural excess capacity in Indian industries. It said India's exports account for only about 3% of total American imports. It said production is largely geared towards Indian domestic demand, not flooding global markets. India also pointed out that it was being investigated for the same practices that China has been engaging in at a far larger scale for decades, and that singling out India was unfair and disproportionate. That pushback is factually reasonable. But it may not matter. Because the Section 301 process is ultimately a political tool. It gives the American executive branch leverage. The investigations are a message: sign the deal we want, on our terms, or face the consequences. And here is the expert consensus that India needs to hear urgently. It is critical that the agreement between India and the US is sealed by the end of May. India could face the risk of higher tariffs than what was agreed upon in February if it fails to sign off on the deal before the Section 301 investigations conclude. The clock is running. The leverage is shifting. Every week that passes without a signed agreement is a week where the Americans get stronger at the table and India gets weaker. Now let us talk about the elephant in the room. Russian oil. After the Pahalgam attack and Operation Sindoor in May 2025, India was already under pressure on multiple fronts. And one of Trump's explicit demands, the condition attached to the tariff reduction, was that India stop buying Russian oil. At the peak of its Russian oil purchases, India was importing nearly 40% of its crude from Russia at deeply discounted prices. That oil was a lifeline for Indian refiners, Indian consumers, and Indian industry during a period of global energy price volatility. India started reducing those purchases. State refiners signed American LNG contracts. Private refiners quietly shifted supply chains. By December 2025, Russia's share had fallen from 40% to under 25%. India was paying the political and economic cost of reducing its dependence on cheap Russian crude. And what did it get in return? A framework announcement. An unsigned agreement. A tariff reduction that has since been legally invalidated. And now a new investigation that could result in punitive tariffs regardless of what India does. The Indian government has been careful in its public statements. Modi's post celebrating the deal did not explicitly mention Russia. India's Commerce Minister confirmed the intention to sign a deal but gave no details on implementation. The deliberate ambiguity tells you everything. India is trying to preserve wiggle room on Russian oil while extracting whatever it can from the Americans. But here is the uncomfortable truth. If the Section 301 investigations conclude badly for India, and new tariffs are imposed before a deal is signed, India will have paid the Russian oil price and still ended up worse off. That would be a significant diplomatic failure. Not because Modi made the wrong call, reducing dependence on Russian oil is strategically sound in the long run, but because the sequencing went wrong. India gave the concession before the deal was signed. And in negotiations with Trump, that is a fatal error. Let us be honest about what India's real position is right now. India is not weak. India just concluded a massive free trade agreement with the European Union in January, what Modi himself called the mother of all deals. India finalized agreements with the UK, Oman, New Zealand, and Canada in rapid succession. India's trade diversification strategy is working. If the American deal falls apart, India has options. It has alternatives. It is not desperate. India's goods trade surplus with the United States was $58 billion in 2025. America needs Indian exports, pharmaceuticals, generic medicines that keep American healthcare costs from going completely off the charts, software services, textiles. A trade war with India is not cost-free for Washington either. And India knows this. The "we are not in a hurry" signal from New Delhi is not panic. It is a negotiating position. India is trying to wait out the legal uncertainty, extract better terms under the new tariff framework, and avoid being locked into an 18% rate when everyone else is paying 10%. But there is a real risk. The Section 301 process gives Washington a new tool, one with stronger legal standing than what the Supreme Court struck down. If India delays too long, it could face a new tariff regime that is worse than the one it was originally trying to escape. The window to lock in a good deal is closing. May is nearly over. June brings the Section 301 conclusions. July brings the expiry of the current flat tariff. After that, all bets are off. India's negotiators are walking a razor's edge. Move too fast, and you lock in terms that may be worse than what the new legal landscape offers. Move too slow, and you lose the window entirely and face something much worse. India needs to play this in 3 moves simultaneously. First, accelerate the EU deal implementation. The trade agreement with Europe is worth potentially hundreds of billions in market access and is a genuine structural shift in India's trade geography. Every week spent finalizing and implementing that agreement reduces India's dependence on the American relationship and strengthens India's negotiating hand in Washington. Second, engage aggressively in the Section 301 hearings. India submitted its formal response. But government engagement alone is not enough. Indian industry bodies, Indian pharmaceutical companies, Indian textile exporters, all of them need to be flooding the American Trade Authority with data, with testimony, with economic analysis showing that Indian excess capacity is not the cause of American industrial decline. China is the cause. India is the solution. Third, negotiate hard but do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If a deal can be struck that gives India a rate better than or equal to the flat 10% that every other country is paying, India should take it. A signed agreement, even an imperfect one, is infinitely better than legal uncertainty and the risk of a punitive Section 301 outcome. India made real concessions to get a trade deal with America. It reduced Russian oil purchases. It offered zero tariffs. It promised $500 billion in American product purchases. And 3 months later, the legal foundation of that deal has been ruled illegal by America's own Supreme Court, the deal remains unsigned, and a new investigation is targeting Indian industries with the potential for tariffs worse than anything India has faced before. Is Modi getting played? Not necessarily. India still has cards to play. But the clock is ticking, the leverage is shifting, and the window is closing faster than most people realize. Here is what I want to leave you with. Trump is negotiating with India the same way he negotiates with everyone: maximum pressure, moving goalposts, and rewarding those who flatter him while punishing those who don't. India knows this. India has seen this. The question is whether India can outmaneuver it, or whether New Delhi blinks at the wrong moment and locks itself into a deal that costs more than it delivers. The trade relationship between the world's oldest democracy and the world's largest democracy should be one of the defining economic partnerships of this century. Right now, it looks more like a bazaar where one side keeps changing the price. Tell me what you think India should do in the comments below. And if BharatLens is giving you the real picture, subscribe. This is the lens through which India sees the world.